Our first presenter. Our first project presentation of session 2 is with Angela Barbash. Angela is CEO of Revalue, an independent registered investment advisory firm founded in 2013, located in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Revalue is a certified B Corporation that provides fee-only financial planning and investment management services designed for impact to values-driven organizations and investors. Ms. Barbash has dedicated 16 years in service as a financial advisor in the Metro Detroit region and was named a 2018 Notable Women in Finance in Michigan by Crain's Detroit Business. She studied cultural anthropology and history at Eastern Michigan University and began a professional career at the Michigan Small Business Center, SBDC. Before entering the financial services sector, Revalue is a founding member of the United Way of Washtenaw County Financial Stability Coalition and the National Coalition for Community Capital, NC3. Additionally, Ms. Barbash has been named a 2020-2021 Leader of Color in the Champions for Change Fellowship hosted by Nonprofit Enterprise at Work. Are you there, Angela?
I am. Hello.
Hello. How are you, friend?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm good. And congrats on the Champions for Change Fellowship.
Thank you. I'm very excited.
Great. Yeah, great news. Okay, so Angela, oh, there you are.
There we go.
Are you ready?
I am. Let me get the presentation queued up here. I am so delighted to share this information with everyone today, the results of the project that we did this year as an innovation fellow with MSU. Thank you to Jen and your entire team for the support and the opportunity to dive in even deeper into the community capital ecosystem over the last 9 months, 9 months in the midst of COVID and all the things. So without further ado, let's get into it. Jen, hopefully you're seeing my screen right now. Yes.
Yep, I'm seeing your screen.
Okay, fantastic. So first, let's talk about, let's go over what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to give you a 30,000 foot view. We're going to talk about the supply chain for the community capital ecosystem, some of the solutions that have been requested by participants in that ecosystem, and actions that all of you who are watching this today can take. Before I dive into that, though, I'd like to share this picture with you right here. This is a picture of our entry wall into our office in Ypsilanti. We put this question up on the wall and invited anyone and everyone who entered our space over the last 2 years to add to this wall and put their responses in. So you'll see a few other shots from this wall, but it really was heartwarming and encouraging to see what people wrote, everything from treasury notes to into people, as one of my good friends wrote here in Ypsilanti. So this is, let's talk about the project scope this year. What we wanted to do was map the community capital ecosystem that included people, organizations, and resources that make up the current marketplace. This came out of actually a convening that Michigan Economic Development Corporation did in December with a number of stakeholders from around the state to talk about the community capital movement and where it was and where we all wanted to take it in Michigan. Many of you on the call may know that Michigan is perhaps, I'd say, arguably the most developed community capital driven state in the union. But maybe if you didn't know that, you know that now, and you're going to learn more about why we say that. But even for all the people that came together at that convening, the one thing that we didn't really have our fingers on the pulse of at that moment was the state of the supply chain and what the pain points were in that supply chain. And we had decided that that was an important next step. We were grateful that that MSU was in the room at that time, and we were able to connect and quickly jump on this so that we can continue to develop this ecosystem. So this project involved informational interviews, doing research on trends, both in Michigan, any data that we could get our hands on, and elsewhere around the country. Kind of bringing together of all of the current initiatives that are underway in the ecosystem, some working on ideas for how to solve some of the pain points, and then presenting those findings to you all, including some graphics that can be used by anyone, that we're going to open source to everyone, to help explain what is the community capital ecosystem in Michigan and what are the major tenets of it. And so we'll make those available afterward, but you also see a couple of those in the slide deck today. So first, let's take a kind of a very high level view of what the community capital ecosystem is. What do we mean when we say that? So first, when we're talking about community capital, we're talking about people shifting their investment dollars to their local community. So people like to say out of Wall Street and into Main Street. We're also taking a very long view. I think myself included and many others, when we got into this work over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we thought that a shift of even 1% of our capital from Wall Street to Main Street would be possible in 5 years or 10 years. And after 16 years of learning how capital flows and how it works, we're realizing that we have to take a much longer view. It took us hundreds of years to get to where we are right now with regard to economics and how money moves in our country, and we think it's going to take 100 years to change that system, really truly change that system. So we really want everyone to take a very long view with this work that we're doing, and that you all are doing as future advocates as well. Next, let's talk about the foundational components of this ecosystem. So on the surface, it might look like just shifting capital from Wall Street to Main Street, invest locally. That activity is what we're talking about. But there's actually 4 major pieces involved in making that even possible. The first is social capital. That is the relationships that fuel that shift of capital. That is investors connecting with business owners and entrepreneurs, business owners and entrepreneurs connecting with technical assistance providers, peer-to-peer support among investors, among technical assistance providers, among economic developers, among business owners. That sharing of social capital is really the grease in the wheels. Next, you've got story sharing, and it's story sharing, not storytelling, because in this space, we need to hear and share each other's stories as investors, as professional service providers who are serving investors, and no matter what your perspective is in this marketplace, the people get excited and feel motivated to take action when they've heard someone's story about how it worked for them or how it didn't work for them or what they learned out of it. And then they also have the opportunity to reciprocate on that story. So it's an important element of this work. Third is infrastructure. That is, what are the organizations that are technically doing the work involved in this movement? Where is the education available to these various audiences within the ecosystem? And what are the legal frameworks that we're using? That also can include policy change. And then number 4 is flow acceleration. That is, that if you have social capital, you have people sharing their stories and writing case studies, we have examples to look at, and we have the infrastructure of the people doing the technical things that we need to be done, we still need kind of an overarching study of the ecosystem as a whole, an identification of the barriers and pain points in that supply chain, and the remediation of those barriers and pain points. Not just a removal of the barriers, but a studying of the barriers so that we can make intelligent business decisions about how to remediate them over time. And if we didn't do that, I think that what will happen is what we've already seen over the last 5 years, which is that we have the mechanisms, we have social capital, we have story sharing, growing, but we are still not seeing the flow that we'd all like to see to some degree. Those of us that are very kind of involved in it, we are still seeing barriers, and it's because there's really no person or entity or group of people that are studying and managing those key issues as they arise. And those will continue to evolve over time, so it's a constant kind of an ongoing need. So here are the high-level findings, and I could speak forever about these high-level findings, but these are the things I really wanted you all to know, is that first of all, businesses are very challenged in trying to figure out how to access community investing. So they might know that they could raise community capital, they've heard about it before, but they might go to their attorney or go to their business consultant or someone else who's helping them, and that person does not often know where to send them or is not very familiar with the information or the mechanisms. And so that's generally how they get stopped in their tracks, and they take a different route for capital, or they raise no capital at all. Number two, investors cannot easily find businesses who need capital. Part of this is a structural issue with regard to solicitation, where say a business in your town could use $100,000 in growth capital or to refinance some very expensive debt that they have, but they can't say anything to anyone to gather interest even unless they have registered a security, which then is assuming a legal cost that they may not be able to afford. So if they don't register the security, the investors have no way of knowing that that business needs the capital unless they're friends with that business. And there are very few entities in the ecosystem that could put up a list even of businesses that are raising capital right now, because that in and of itself is considered solicitation. So for instance, Revalue, as a registered investment advisory firm, we cannot publicly do that. But there are maybe other entities that could do it. So it's a little messy, and it's hard for investors to find those deals or those businesses. Number three, every step of the supply chain is siloed. They know what they know, the attorneys know what they know, the accountants, the business consultants, the marketing agencies, the platforms, they all know what they know within their sector, but there's not a whole lot of cross-pollination across them. And there are people trying to resolve that and help with that, but it's still a factor today. There's a variety of different types of investors that could come to the table with different priorities and profiles. You could maybe broadly say that there's like 5 different kinds of community investors, or community impact investors as they're sometimes called. And they might all show up at the table to try to invest in a business, but then they have different needs and priorities that make that capital stacking very difficult for the business to manage, or for any of the investors at the table to manage. And there's not a whole lot of facilitation in the ecosystem right now to help remove that issue right there. And then the last two, I think, are really important for people to know. There's a fairly limited number of people that are actually stewarding this movement in Michigan. And maybe with more depth of research, the number might be more like 100. But roughly there's about 50 people. And there was a very clear pattern in the interviews of financial harm, lost business opportunity, stress, fear of regulatory retaliation, things like that people were very concerned about, and they felt it was hampering progress with the community capital movement in Michigan and elsewhere in the country. And so I feel a moral obligation to raise this as a concern and get it on people's radar that there is a fair amount of stress, largely due to a lack of funding support or structural support for this movement. And everybody's just trying to kind of do their part in it as they can. Next, let's talk about the supply chain. Now, before I show this very complicated graphic I'm about to put up, I want to first say that there are 2 supply chains actually at play here. One is for businesses and the other one is for investors. We chose to dive into the business side of this because the investors really can't do anything. They can't organize in a supply chain if the businesses are not coming to market with the offerings in the first place. And so in this equation, you need those businesses first, then the investors can more readily come to the market. So let's focus in on the businesses. So here are the primary intersections or the steps that every business is going to have to care about if they're going to raise capital within their community. First, they have to learn what they need to know. So there's an educational process that they need to go through that can be done a number of ways, through their consultants, through peer-to-peer learning, or through them just, kind of learning on their own. Second, they need to go to legal. They need to decide what type of registration they're going to use. Are they going to use the MILE Act here in Michigan, Michigan Invest Locally exemption? Are they going to use Reg CF, which is federal regulation crowdfunding? Are they going to use Reg D, Reg A+? What are they going to use? There's a variety of choices that they have to be made aware of, and then get that documentation and registration in order so that they are not violating securities laws. Next, they need to know how to market a campaign. Who are they going to go to? How are they going to pitch themselves? What does that deck look like of how they're making their business case to others in a way that's both informative but not overwhelming? Next, they, and sometimes this is in tandem, they would work with a platform. Now, Michigan's MILE Act does not require that a company use a platform, but Reg CF does. So a platform may or may not be a pit stop for them. And if they are working with a platform, that platform may or may not be able to help them on the marketing front. They may expect them to come in the door with everything that they need right out of the gate. So, so at the platform, they're going to be doing an initial round of due diligence on them, because the platform can't take risk on a business that is not being truthful about its financials, or has a weak business case for raising capital in the first place. So they're going to do a round of due diligence. They're going to approve them to be on the platform, and then they're going to help them execute that capital raise for a success fee. And then lastly, and this is often off the radar of businesses, is the post-raise services that they need. So that is interacting with those investors, reporting with those investors, and making sure that they're meeting their commitments, both to the regulatory authority that they registered their security with, and to the investors, and what the investors want to know and how they're trying to help them, often in after, like with the business, help them grow the business. So those are the major intersections. Then here's what we found. So on the education front, we have some learning that is hitting the internet. It has been kind of dripped and drabbed out over the last few years, and there's a big advancement that I'll talk about in a few slides that's going to be made here in the next couple of months, of having online access to information. But what we did not find or see was any specific educational resources that's tailored to specific audiences. So for instance, the SEC and FINRA, the governing bodies for the investment advisory and securities world, they mention regulation crowdfunding. They have a couple of investor fact sheets and like 10 things to 10 warning signs that you might be being defrauded, or kind of that sort of investor protection stuff, but they don't have coursework. They don't have continuing education coursework for investment advisors, or web courses for investors, things like that. We found that a lot of technical assistance providers, for lack of knowledge and education, are steering people toward bank financing or venture financing, or just telling them like, you can't qualify for bank and venture's not right for you, so good luck with friends and family, when there really are better mechanisms to help them organize that friends and family capital raise in the ecosystem. So there's a lot of educational needs. On the legal front, I want to give credit to 4 specific attorneys that were highlighted by people in interviews, and I've known all 4 of these over the years. One of which, Jeff Aronoff, is not even practicing anymore, but people still talk about him for the value that he has provided to the marketplace over the years. He's now with Miller Canfield. Mike Olsaver is now a judge in Lenawee County, and Kate Redman is a real estate developer who put up a capital raise herself. And then Jennifer Ortel is with Bodman Law. So there's very specific attorneys that are known as the go-to people in the ecosystem. What I would love to see, though, is in a year or two that we have a very full roster of attorneys. And I'm sure that as attorneys watch this presentation, they're going to be like, oh, wait, me too. And so, yes, please tell us that you are knowledgeable about these things so that we can put you on the roster when people ask us for referrals and ask others for referrals. One thing that was identified on legal is that it would make it a lot easier if we had template documents, capital raise documents, on offering documents available, and those are currently not available. It's something that several, these attorneys and others have highlighted would make life a lot easier on this front. Marketing, there was one marketing agency with experience, but some negative feedback about that agency. In other words, there were no other marketing agencies identified who specifically specialize in crowdfunding campaigns, either donation or investment-based crowdfunding campaigns. So that's a big gap in the ecosystem. Platforms, we have 13 registered in the state of Michigan, 50 plus registered at a federal level across the country, but only 3 of those are the ones that you will find Michigan raises on, and none of them are based in Michigan. They are local stake, Honeycomb Credit, and WeFunder, and they're all great platforms, and I appreciate all the work and that these guys are doing, but we do not have a Michigan-based platform yet. And then lastly, post-raise services. The platforms provide some services, particularly on a reporting front, but there were no other service providers that could be identified through our research. Okay, I want to tell you who's behind this movement. So we organized this along the 4 major components of the ecosystem, and I just want to say right out of the gate, there are so many great people doing work both in Michigan and outside of Michigan. I could not possibly throw them all on a chart for you, but I really just wanted to make sure that you knew that there were organizations that are actively circulating social capital, actively telling stories and producing case studies, being, the real weaving the framework for infrastructure, and are trying to accelerate deal flow as much as possible. And so these are the people that I would point to that you could also go to. Many of them have got resources directly on their website for you to learn more, to start engaging today. And I'm busting through these so that you don't get pulled off with the soundtrack and the hook. So the solutions here. This is a very wordy slide, but one of the questions that we asked in those informational interviews was, if you had a magic wand that you could wave and change one thing about the Michigan's community capital ecosystem, what would it be? And almost like unequivocally, everyone said either something involving infrastructure or something involving the lack of funding or getting funding for program and service delivery. So these are the things that we call magic wand moments. These are not our ideas. These are the requests on behalf of the 23 people, but I would absolutely endorse every single one of these, because these will help us get further with the community capital ecosystem and movement in Michigan, and really help these businesses connect with their communities and their customers in a more significant way, especially at a time right now like that we need. We need these businesses to be able to be rallied around by their community. I know these slides are going to be made available, so I'm going to go ahead and advance to the next slide, but I hope that you take a moment to read these a little further later if you don't get a chance to completely read them now. So I want to give a spotlight before I wrap up of 4 specific organizations and the work that they're doing. So I mentioned earlier that a number of things are really coming online, or there's things happening as we're speaking. I want to start with Cooperative Capital, who is led by Kwaku Osai and a number of other people on that board and on that team. They're out of Detroit, and they had intended to start a community investment fund years ago, ended up not being able to do that. they have reimagined the organization, and what they're doing now is getting ready to launch an initiative where investors in a community can raise their hand to say they're interested in investing locally. And once that community has hit a critical mass of investors, interested investors, cooperative capital will help them set up an investment club so that they can then work together as a group of people. And we really think that investment clubs is going to be an accelerator, an accelerating moment for communities around the state, where there are a number of people that are ready to come together and strategically fund various businesses in their community. So we're very excited to see that go live, hopefully this winter. Second is CEDM, Community Economic Development Association of Michigan. Probably almost everybody here has heard of them, but what you might not know is that they have a real estate development boot camp. And one of the things that was asked of by people in the Magic Wand moment was more real estate development, like small scale real estate development training and resources to be made accessible. And CEDM is doing it. And so I want everyone to know that if you know someone who's interested in smaller scale community-based real estate development in creating affordable housing or housing for single parents, that CEDM can help you with that. Next is Michigan Community Capital. So they're a nonprofit real estate developer, and they are doing affordable housing deals around the state, and they're very receptive to community investors being a part of those opportunities in the future. And I think if you are an investor and you're interested in investing in affordable housing, give them a ring and let them know that you're out there, and that lets them know that the market may be ready for them to work together with community investors for the next affordable housing deal that they do. And then lastly, the Local Investing Resource Center. We had the privilege of working on a revamp of this website with a team out of Vermont that is stewarding this. This website was put up 8 years ago by a colleague, James Frazier from the West Coast, and it has now been taken over by Local Cap out of Vermont. And we created an advisor resource kit for financial advisors to download so that they can have this conversation with their clients in their compliance department and have some very tangible resources to work off of. And we're expecting that to go live in October. So actions. Here's what you can do right now. So a lot of this is exposing people to ideas. It's telling them that this is real, that this movement is growing, and there is very real need and demand in the marketplace. And in those spaces where we don't have a whole lot of options, like a marketing firm, if you know a marketing firm that is inclined to be connected to small businesses and wants to help them succeed, letting them know that this is a type of business they could be doing could be very helpful. Leveraging your position, your influence. There are student teams at universities that could be producing case studies. So I tried to give you a couple of things in every category that you could take action on, even if you're not, part of the ecosystem, quote unquote, and you're doing something completely differently. Just keep these things in mind the next time that you're in one of those cool hangout conversations with a friend of yours in a different sector or silo. And here's a couple of graphics that you can use. So there's one on equitable economy key principles that are emerging here in Michigan and elsewhere. We took those 4 components and put it into an infographic. We're going to share both of these on a blog post and on social media in the coming weeks. And I imagine MSU is going to have some, some place that this will live online. You can also use these hashtags to help us organize the movement and really raise awareness for shifting our capital to our own backyards. And lastly, we will talk about these things wherever we're invited. Of course, that's self-serving because we're investment advisors, so I'm not going to be shy about that for people that really need the assistance. But beyond that, it's just part of our mission to help you and others understand what is possible and what is happening right now, and to be excited about that and to really understand what the challenges and opportunities are. So if you have a place that you'd like to get this conversation in, you can actually book us as a speaker right through our website. And I would encourage you to do that. Just go to revalueinvesting.com, go to book a meeting, and you'll see that as an option. I need a speaker, and we would be happy to be there. So without further ado, thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing your questions and answering them later.